Education and Children's Services Scrutiny Committee. Can't get my teeth in. So welcome to members of the Education and Children's Service Scrutiny Committee, and also to any viewers who have tuned in this morning. Please bear in mind there may be unforeseen technical difficulties. However, we will aim to keep any such difficulties to a minimum. Members, please ensure that your microphone is muted during the meeting and only switched on when you are speaking. Any members joining the meeting today using a mobile phone can mute and unmute by pressing *6. This will ensure that any background noise in your location will not be picked up throughout the meeting. After each item has been presented, the committee will be asked to indicate whether they wish to speak by using the raise the hand facility. Is everybody okay with that up to now? The announcement this week is Social Care Week, and throughout the week the County Council staff will be sharing good news stories on our Team Lancashire Facebook page. There's also a programme of events being hosted on the Social Work England website, which is www.socialworkengland.org.uk. So I hope that everybody will have a look and take in all our good stories.
Madam Chairman, you've gone.
You're muted, Andrea, for some reason.
Bonnie?
I can hear a dog. I didn't know I got muted. Right, so sorry, did you get the social work and announcements and the website?
Yes.
www.
Right. Yes.
Did you all get that? Right,
Yes.
sorry. So introductions. Sharon, stop cutting me off. It's Sharon Hubbard, Director of Children's Social Care, and Mandy Williams, Head of Service for Family Safeguarding. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you, Councillor.
We'll move on now to item 1, apologies and replacements. Brian, would you like to let us know, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just bear with me 1 second. We have apologies from Janet Hamid, who's a co-opted voting member representing parent governors in the secondary sector, and we have no replacements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brian. Number 2, disclosure of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Members are asked to consider any pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests they may have to disclose during the meeting in relation to matters under consideration on the agenda. It would be helpful if members could be specific about the item in which they have an interest and the nature of the interest declared. Do we have any to declare, please? Silence is golden, so I'll take that as no. Moving on to item 3, minutes of the special meeting held on the 2nd of February. So we've got 2 sets of minutes this morning, members. So the first one is on the 2nd of February. Andrew, your hand's up. Oh, has it gone down? Stephen Clark?
No, my hand's up, Madam Chair. Sorry.
Oh, is it still up? You vanished.
I'm having a techo this morning. My fingers are going too fast with your brain. It's on the 2nd of Feb. Could I just ask, Madam Chair, that the resolve was that the Education and Children's Services Committee asked that the Cabinet members written to the Secretary of State for Education and also Lancashire MPs to highlight the circumstances currently faced by early years sector. Has that happened, and have we had any responses either from the Minister or any MP so far?
Can we answer that on the next set of minutes?
Yeah, we certainly can. Sorry, I've jumped the gun.
Sorry, no, it's fine. It's fine. Stephen, did you want to ask anything on the minutes of the what did I say? You've confused me. 2nd of February. Stephen, you're not on. You're quiet.
Right, I'd like to propose those minutes, please.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Second those, Chair.
Stephen, Jimmy, thank you. Right, moving on to minutes of the 9th of February. We'll take into Andrew's question. Is there any other questions? Because Jimmy, you've got your hand up.
Yes. Can I speak now?
You
Chair?
can speak now as well, yes.
Okay, Chair. I apologise for possibly jumping the gun on Andrew. On the 9th of February, it's on page 7. It's item 4, the last paragraph. Can I ask the cabinet member, who's for children and young people, to, as she written to the Secretary of State and all Lancashire MPs, if the answer is yes, have we had a response? And if not, can the cabinet member inform us as soon as possible when they have received any information, as I have had concerns from some of my constituents in Rosendale East. Also, could I thank on that occasion for Peter Angel for an excellent presentation which he showed to all members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Gary, do you know if we've had a response? Because both questions are very similar.
I'm not aware of a response coming through. We can always pass that on for response after the meeting.
Oh, that'll be great. And then can we email members to let them know?
Yeah, that's fine.
Once we get the response. Munsif, is your thumb up to ask something, or is it? No, I didn't know if you were.
My apologies. No, I'll always put my hand up.
All right, I just saw a thumb and then the other one come up. Thank you. So thank you, Andrew and Jimmy, for your questions. On the rest of the minutes, can we say the rest of the minutes are accurate?
Yes.
Have we got a proposer?
Move those, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Anne. Right then, so we'll expect then a response from Philippa to come out to everybody. Item 4, update on family safeguarding model. This report is a follow-up of the report arising from the former Children's Services Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 15th of January 2020, when it considered a report on the neglect strategy. Lancashire County Council launched the new family safeguarding model on the 11th of February 2021. Would you like to come in? Anybody? Thank you. Sharon, are you doing your own slides or is somebody doing them for you?
I'm gonna try and do my own slides.
Oh, right. Okay, thank you.
I don't
Just
know.
checking.
Can you see them?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Right. I'll just go them onto slideshow and then they are. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, we can see them, yes.
Brilliant. Okay. So I came, if you remember, last year in January 2020 to talk about our implementation and our successful bid to the DFE around implementing a social work model. We need to be really clear, it's a social work model that has an impact right across the spectrum of care and protection of all children in Lancashire. So I'm here to update you as to where we have got to and how things have moved along. So we had a launch date of the 11th of February. The 11th of February was because we had to have certain staff in place for us to be able to say that this is now a family safeguarding model. So the slide I'm showing is just kind of the journey really of all of the months. So we started 8 months before, and I think I want to say very much so that the staff have been incredible, because in the middle of a pandemic of doing things so very differently and continuing to protect children, we also managed to implement this model on the date that we were supposed to, with all the things in place that were meant to be in place. So it was a phenomenal achievement, but you know, not just from social workers, but from corporate and also from the programme team that have been supporting us for the last 18 months. So you can see the journey, and then I came last time and talked to you about why did we need to change that. I think I'll just go back over that, if that's okay. So nationally, as well as locally and regionally, we've got rising numbers of children in care and care proceedings. And our resources are all spent on assessment and monitoring. And actually, we weren't really able to see how that's changed. We couldn't show that by doing all of this assessment and going into houses lots of times, that actually we were making a really positive change. And the way that we knew that is that we continued to take children into care and going into court. We've become experts at process, but we need to develop skills in making a difference. And the family safeguarding model is really changing our language. You will start to hear throughout the whole of children's services, so not just in my part of the world, but also in Sarah Callahan's part of the world, that language change that talks about working with families, that talks about engaging them. And what we used to do is we used to say to them, if you don't do this, we'll do this. And it was a very transactional way of working with families. Basically, unless they followed our rules, we were going to undertake certain pieces of work at them, not with them. So we really are changing the way that we talk, the way that we deal with families. And one of the things that has become incredibly important to us is actually about kindness and remembering. We've become very, very professional in our roles. And what that means is we've kind of lost some of that warmth, and we've lost a little bit of why did we come into this job? And we are the people who uphold social justice for families, and we've kind of lost that in a way. That's not just us in Lancashire, that's across nationally, that there's a lot of professionalism, dealing with people in a professional manner. We want to go back, and what we need to remember is anybody, and I mean anybody, can be open to us, and it could be your family. And that's the bottom line for us. If this was your family receiving a social care intervention, how would you want them to be treated? And how do you want them to be spoken to? And how do we write about people? We need to stop writing about people as if they're subjects, and remember that they are people, and they are families, and they are human beings who just sometimes have got it really wrong. And nobody really wants to abuse their children. Sometimes things happen that get you into a situation that means you are having real difficulties in protecting your children. And that's the bit that family safeguarding really makes you think about. So we needed to change. And the way for us to change is that we have moved away from having 3 areas of social work. So we used to have the East, the North and Central. And within each of those areas had everything. So they had the front door, which is our duty and assessment, going out for the first time, check how families are doing. We have referrals from people, and we go out. Also, we have child protection, child in need, and our court teams, our looked after children, our care leavers. So within each of those 3 areas, we had all of the services being run through one head of service. We've moved now to heads of service being responsible for a function. What we believe that will do is give more consistency to families across the county. So we have a head of service now for the front door. We have a head of service for family safeguarding, head of service for children and care leavers, and a head of service for fostering, adoption, residential care and youth offending. And we will hopefully, and we're really clear about this, we will begin to see a real consistency for those children and those families that are being dealt with in those teams. So what are the key components of family safeguarding? Well, we've talked about it's about keeping more children safely within their families. We absolutely know that the best place for you to achieve is in your family, but we also know that sometimes it's not safe for you to be there. But actually what we tend to do is remove you from your family to decide whether we can make it safe. And this really looks at that and says, no, Let's think about how we keep children in an environment as safely as we possibly can. I need to assure you that where we know that safety is not, we can't keep children safe, we are continuing to remove children, we're continuing to go into the courts. But what we know quite often is that certainly adolescents at that point of where they become that 13, 14-year-old, and their behaviour is really difficult, that actually sometimes families feel they've got nowhere to turn and the only option is to say to us, you need to care for them. So we need to start to look at that very differently. What we also know is that when we talked about in that last slide about we say you do this, and if you don't do this, we'll do this. Domestic violence is a big issue for us. It's a big issue for everybody. But what we've done in the past is say to mum, either you stop being beaten up by your partner or we're going to remove your children, or we say the partner has to leave until we decide that they can come back in. And then when people who've been together years and years and years have got children together, still see each other, we say that they're not working with us. We've forgotten that people have got relationships. So we need to then think about, how do we make this safe? How do we make it that this family unit can remain together? So the things that we are doing is that we are having multidisciplinary teams. So we've talked about domestic abuse. We've got real issues with parents' mental health and substance misuse, but we will have teams that will have practitioners who are qualified and skilled in dealing with those issues. That change of language will come through motivational interviewing. We are going to be able to talk and think about how we manage families in a way that stops this combative way of working. Families see us as Dracarian and we see them as not doing as we ask. There's a whole different way. We need to turn that right round and keep thinking about, how would I want somebody to act in my home if this was me? And we've got a new system that's a computer system that's reducing bureaucracy. And that means that social workers can spend more time with families and less time doing all of the paperwork that we expect them to do. So what does a team look like? It looks like it has a team manager, then it has a consultant social worker, and that's somebody who's a senior social worker who has a very small caseload and will support and supervise some of the social workers, but the adult workers as well. There'll be 5 social workers in each team. Our fidelity model is that each of those social workers will have 15 cases and no more. I can't guarantee at this moment in time that we're at 15 cases because we're still not fully staffed. But when we are fully staffed, we will have 15 cases. That might seem either a lot or not to you, but actually 15 cases is a low caseload for qualified social workers. It means that you can go out to families more often. It means that you can truly motivate your families to work together. And then we'll have a child and family practitioner, a domestic abuse practitioner, and either a mental health or a substance misuse specialist and a team coordinator. So what do they do? Well, the child and family practitioners will work directly with children and parents, supporting their improvement of parenting skills. So somebody who comes in as part of the team to really think about, how do you understand budgeting? How do you get to that place where if you've got mental health problems, that you're motivated to clean the house, you're motivated to take your child to school in the morning, all of those things that really need some support, not somebody writing an assessment that says, Mum is really struggling to take the children to school. Actually, we'll have done all of that. The child and family practitioner will be supporting that family to make the changes that we know will support them to keep their children in their family. Social workers will be doing exactly what I've just talked about. We'll be doing assessments, but we're also going to be doing intervention. We're going to be motivating families and developing really high quality multidisciplinary plans. The team manager will really work together as a group and they'll give individual reflective supervision, but also families will receive group supervision from all the multi-agency people who are working with them. So people will sit round the table and talk about how are things, what are we going to do, how are we going to support this family to remain together in the safest possible way. And within that team then, those skills and expertise of the domestic abuse workers, the substance misuse recovery workers and the mental health specialists are not necessarily, we won't be making referrals to those organisations. They'll be sat in the teams. That means we can get families the help and support much quicker. And then the team coordinator will do all of that minuting of the group supervision, team administration, and collect all of that data. What difference do we think it'll make? Well, what we know, where it has been rolled out elsewhere, is that it definitely creates a reduction in repeat police call-outs to domestic abuse. There's a reduction in emergency hospital admissions for adults. So when we know that women are turning up in A&E with domestic abuse injuries, they don't always describe it as that, obviously, but we know that that's what women are turning up for. But actually, we know that there is a reduction in that. There's a reduction in child protection plans, a reduction in care proceedings, and a real improvement in school attendance. And you might think, well, that seems very random from all of those things there. What we know is children with good school attendance, children who are succeeding at school, go on to be citizens that are able to work, that are able to bring their own families up well. And that means that there is less demand on resource. And it's really important that we see school attendance just as important as every other bit of social work that we do. And what difference will it make across the partnership? Well, staff across all of the disciplines will feel more confident and less stressed. We'll have improved recruitment and retention of staff, and that means that we'll have better relationships with our schools, better relationships with our GPs, because our staff are staying longer. We will have a reduction in expenditure. The first year we should begin to see a decrease in the amount of finances we are using on placements, on legal and on agency staffing costs. And there will definitely be savings for A&E and police. And our partnerships will be strengthened with all our agencies and with the courts. Our next steps are that we will have clear partnership funding and implementation and sustainability agreements, which means that we are able to take this forward right across the county. It's not a pilot, it's not in certain areas, but we are absolutely clear that all of our partners have now signed up to the pledges, and our next steps are to be able to really drive forward the family safeguarding model. We are working very closely with Hertfordshire. They created this model, but they're committed to staying in touch with us and helping us see this all through. We launched on the 11th, we didn't land, and it's really important that we are not saying family safeguarding is now in Lancashire. What we are saying is we've started family safeguarding. We've lots more to do. There's another 12 months before we would say we've now embedded family safeguarding, but we're definitely on our way. And we will be able to show the evidence of that. We have an external evaluation company that we're working with, the What Works Centre. They've been appointed by the DFE to come in and talk to us and help us evaluate how successful this piece of work has been. And I think there's two bits for us. One is the success of families remaining together. The other success is that we are only removing children where it's necessary. And the third part of the success is that we should begin to see some financial reductions within that area of work. And the other bit is that all of our partners across the county will then all work together to make sure that we are only dealing with children where there is an absolute need for them to come into the social work part of the world. Our early help is becoming far more resourced. I know that Sarah Callahan and Debbie Duffel came to talk to you about that, and we are really resourcing that early help where we know lots of families sit and that the only people that should be coming up to our part of the world is where we absolutely know that we have to work with them because abuse is occurring, not because families can't cope, but because we need to intervene at this point. So that's where we hope to get to by the end of next year. So that's kind of my presentation, Councillor Kay.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon.
So the recommendation is, I think I'm echoing there, the recommendation is the Education and Children's Services Scrutiny Committee is asked to note the progress of the model and how the service will move forward following the implementation. We've got Councillor Ann Cheetham, please, who would like to ask a question. Sharon, do you want to take your slides down and then you'll go back up? Or
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I thank you for a wonderful report? It is a most encouraging report, and to bring it to our attention so near to the start of the plan of safeguarding. I didn't declare. I was a former chairman of the magistrates bench in East Lancashire for young people who came into the care of the local authority. I'm also a former foster parent as well, so I look at it from two different angles. The one area that does concern me slightly is notification to us as a local authority of children that are in private establishments through perhaps other court orders from other local authorities. In Rossendale, we do have a dearth of private children's homes where the children are not necessarily in the care of being overseen by Lancashire. Now, the one thing that I noted within this report is, and I presumed it was down to the last person actually, that little one team coordinator, is to liaise with their opposite number from other authorities. And I particularly do think of the Calder Valley and also in my area, Bury and Bolton. But I am just concerned that we are setting a very, very good example, but I am not so confident about your colleagues in other authorities working with you as I feel they ought to. That is an observation, Chairman, which just concerns me slightly as to who is the actual lead on children that are supposedly put in other places. Secondly, just one observation. I think some of us may have received an email, I think it was either Friday night or Monday this week, of a new agency connected with looking after teenagers with a strength on East Lancashire. I've never heard of the organisation. There was a very long, detailed letter. I would have liked to have seen if this does come under the auspices of Lancashire County Council on this basis. Do we have connections with it? Thank you very much, Chairman.
thank you. Councillor Nikki Hennessy.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning,
Morning.
committee. I got thrown out there. How dare you throw me out of this committee? What's happening? It is a bit panicking, isn't it? You know, I think it's the weather. It's quite windy here now. Sorry about that. Oh, Sharon, it's always a pleasure to see you. You always give such positivity because, you know, myself and the chair, you know, poverty was such a big issue for us. And for what you're doing, it really is. It's great. You know, I know it's only a year and we've had an awful year, but you're doing a great job. The point I'd like to raise, would it be possible for us as individual councillors to know who our team leaders are in each area? Because, you know, we pick up things, you know, individually as councillors, and it's good for us to have somebody, you know, on the bat phone that we can call up or send a direct email, you know, if there's a family in need in our area. Is there any chance? I know you haven't got the full team together, but, you know, just having that information at hand when, you know, the family really needs the support. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on that, Sharon?
Yeah, do you want me to wait for all the questions and then because I've got some answers to Councillor Cheetham. Do you want me to do all of them and then come back?
Whichever you feel best with.
Okay, so if I go to Councillor Cheetham's first.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Cheetham, what I would tell you is that it is a legal mandate that if you place a child in an authority that is not yours, you have to inform the director, the executive director, in this case in Lancashire, that this child has moved in. Now, I can actually assure you that that works, and I'll tell you why. So last year, at the beginning of the pandemic, we did an enormous piece of work of where we have a list of all of those children that come in. So even though we have no responsibility for them as a social care organisation, obviously health do, because you're entitled to universal health wherever you live in the country. So we then we cross-reference with the health lists and with our list to make sure that all of those children are registered within our system. What we then did last year was we wrote to every single local authority that had told us that they had children in our area and said to them, is there anything we can help you with because of the pandemic and the inability to transport? So we have children living in Lancashire, quite rightly, as you say, Councillor Cheetham, who may be from London. So what we did was we worked with every local authority and said, can we help you? Because you can't come from London for a visit, because that's not. So how do we work together? We did all of that, and that list was, there was a couple of anomalies on the list, but on the whole, that list was absolutely up to date, and we knew where they all were. So I can't tell you it was perfect, but it certainly wasn't like, oh, 60% of this is wrong. It was a high percentage was absolutely right, and we could track those children and talk to those local authorities. So that was really pleasing. And we also did it the other way around. So where we've got children that we're placed outside the authority, we wrote to every single one of our those authorities to say, we've got Councillor K placed in the Isle of Wight. We can't come. What are you going to do to help us? So we did it both ways. So just to assure you, really. Good. And then the new agency, that the only oversight of that will be Ofsted. We have nothing to do with other people's, but they would have had to register with Ofsted to get their registration to enable them to care for children.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Hennessy. What I would say is when we're up and running, I think the two bits that's going to be more helpful to councillors actually is around that front door stuff. There's no point ringing a social worker where the case isn't open.
No.
We can't help you in family safeguarding if this is not an open case. So I think what we will want to do, and I think one of the things that I'm not sure we do in Lancashire particularly, because I've never been involved in it, is after elections, doing those kind of awareness raising sessions about safeguarding and about how you refer in to the system and how you determine at what level families require support. So obviously it's a year of elections, so maybe after that, Councillor Kay, we can have a conversation about how where people are scrutinising children's, or that maybe we need to do a little bit of not training, awareness raising. I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs, but certainly just keep you up to date with where we're up to as a county.
Yeah, I did discuss with Carrie that for the future. Yeah.
Happy with that, Chair. Thank you.
Moving on to Councillor Jimmy Eaton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sharon, for an excellent presentation. First of all, could I say that all the bullet points on those, they're all equally important. But on one of them, it was freeing up practitioners to spend more time with families. Again, this I feel is very, very important. The issues I've had from one or two families who's contacted myself is saying sometimes they haven't got through, they've left a message, nobody seems to respond. But also equally, I think you must find it very difficult on occasions where you've got issues with families for you to actually contact them. I appreciate we're in COVID at this moment in time, but also, do you find sometimes it's very difficult to get into that family to sit down and speak to them? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eaton. Yes, this last year has been difficult, but actually what I want to pay, and I'm really glad you started the meeting with the social work week, because our social workers have been so innovative in the way that they have been contacting families. So sometimes, you know, it's a bit of an excuse to say, no, you can't come in because of COVID. But actually what our social workers have done is we've provided equipment for families so that we can virtually speak to them. We have undertaken garden visits when the weather was much better. But we have been incredibly innovative in the way that we have managed to work alongside families. And we have still been going in. So where we are concerned, Councillor Eaton, we don't take no for an answer, just like we didn't when there was no pandemic. So staff are going in masked up. They are going in making sure that it's as safe as possible, both to them and to families. The other thing is that we were able to vaccinate all of our social workers very early on. Again, that gives a level of assurance to our families that we are going in there healthily, as safe as we possibly can. So we've covered every angle, we think. Yes, there are always those families, and there was those families before the pandemic who don't answer the phone, who don't want to talk to us. And quite honestly, why would you want me turning up on your doorstep? So we work hard to make sure that we still see those families, and we are, if we're concerned, still going in those houses.
Just to follow up from that, to say thank you again, and could you pass on my thanks to the people who deal with these, because in some cases it must be very difficult and very sad. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Susie Charles.
Thanks, Sharon, for that. No, it's very good. I've got a couple of questions, I think. First of all, on page 12, second para under communication, should that be lead member or cabinet member? That was the only thing.
I'll go away and check.
Okay, and my question is, it's good that we're borrowing or using from another county council, but what if the abuse doesn't stop? What would happen to the other partner and the children to make sure that they are safe? And I presume, you know, that of course with each family, the time that you spend with them will differ, because of course they will all have different cases. And could I, through the chairman, suggest maybe that we have an update in 6 months, although I won't be on the council, but to see how it's been going for 6 months. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So do you want me to answer the?
Yes.
So Councillor Charles, we absolutely, and I hope it comes through in the report, and I hope it comes through in the presentation, that we are not saying that every family is safe. What we are saying is that we are able to support those families that want to work with us to remain together in a safe way. But where we have families who continue not to work with us, that continue to undertake abusive behaviours towards their children, then that won't change in the way that we deal with that. And the law continues for us under the 89 Act to remove children for a period of time until either we can make it safe, or between us as the courts, we make the decision that these children should permanently not return to their family, and we will find alternative parents for them. So we've not lost any sight of that at all. It's just that we are beginning to realise that probably with more help and assistance, we probably could have kept more families together.
Thank you.
Thanks for that answer.
Moving on to Councillor Edward Nash.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. It's very encouraging, this whole thing. You know, being an ex-military man, I love to see teams organised into little attack groups like that. And you've got 4 areas with 21 teams in, so I presume that they've been situated to where the most need is required. But I'm fascinated by the makeup of the team. What is the role of the coordinator? I mean, for example, I would imagine there's many agencies that are referring people in, but is it possible for families to refer themselves to the teams, or do they have to come through other agencies? And as I say, the role of the coordinator, if you could explain. Thank you.
Okay. So the 21 teams, you're absolutely right, and we've done it very differently this time. Those 21 teams, we have taken the 5 ICS footprints, so you know the footprints of health across the county. We have looked at those and then looked at need in those places. So what we have then looked at, where do we know we've got the most need, instead of where have we got an office that social workers can sit in. So we've really started to look at how we manage need in geographical areas, and that's really important, as opposed to everybody just sitting in Preston and saying, oh well, you'll need to go and travel up there. We need to be more community based. We need to be more accessible to families. So that's absolutely the way that we've done that, Councillor Nash. The second part of your question, it's 2 bits really. So you don't refer yourself into family safeguarding, but families can request support through our front door. So if you remember, not quite a while ago actually, I came to talk about the MASH, the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, and we call that our front door. So that's where maybe you or a teacher or a health visitor makes a referral in and says, really worried about Sharon Hubber. I really think there's something that needs to be done. You know, her neighbours say that they, you know, we've been in to do a visit because I'm a health visitor and the house is awful. Somebody needs to do something about that. So that's our front door. Our front door people go out and make that assessment, and they then decide whether the family safeguarding team needs to become involved. So you don't go directly into the family safeguarding. There's a layer before that. So nobody refers into family safeguarding. It is that you undertake an assessment here, and then that expert decides whether that's the right team for you. As for the coordinator is the person who is, they are the administrator of the team. So they make sure that everything's working together, so that if you've got meetings that need to be held, they're supporting families to get to those meetings. They're making sure that all of the infrastructure of a team happens. So they are business support. That's what they are. They're business support, but quite with some added responsibilities to that.
Thank you very much for that. It looks really well organised, and Sharon, thank you very much for all your work with it.
Thank you, Councillor Nash.
The next is Councillor Andrew Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sharon, thank you for your report. It was very precise and not long-winded. It's how I like them. So thank you for that. I do have a couple of questions. The first one is the team that you've built together, or you've built together, only want to really look after 15. How achievable is that? That's the first question. The second question, if I'm right, you actually flagged up that would actually you'll actually be saving money the way you're working, which is really good. But if that gets out in some ways, there will be certain aspects of people come around and go, oh, it's because the funding was cut, but you've actually been efficient. So could you give us a bit more detail on that as well, please?
Yes, so on the first one, 15 is achievable because we've done all of the calculations, we've done lots and lots of data clips. So we've looked at all of our business for the last 3 years. We've projected our business for the next 2 years. So 15 is achievable, but at this moment in time, if you went into the team, you wouldn't see 15. And that's because we haven't got everybody in place at the moment. So When we have the finance to do it. The DFE gave us money and the county council have given us money so that we can increase the number of social workers within the teams so that we can do 15. So yes, it's achievable, absolutely. Is it there now? No, it's not, but we are working towards it, and we've got a plan, and we've got a big recruitment campaign going on, and we will continue. And the thing with social workers is people kind of move on and they move up, and it's a treadmill really. You'll always have vacancies in social work, but we absolutely are committed to being the 15. Hertfordshire have done it. Other areas that have adopted the model have also done it. So I'm not overly concerned about that, Councillor Gardner, but we are on it. The other bit, when I say that financially we will make some differences to where we spend our money, what I'm very clear about is that's not to be given up. That then is to be able to do other parts of the work at a higher level. So one of the things that Cabinet agreed not long ago is that we are going to change the way that we do residential care for children in Lancashire. So some of the money that we will not be using, and I think we need to stop using saving, and I think you're right, is where we are using our money differently, we will be using it in creating a different residential estate for children in the county. So it's not particularly for giving up, it is to redistribute, to be able to, where we know our pinch points are going to be, we'll put that money into there.
Sharon, thank you. Madam Chair, may I ask one more question? Because Sharon's got so much knowledge and she knows her stuff, which is brilliant. Okay, the final question is, in the time you've been running this, how much do you think your success rate has increased from where, because you used the word draconian, which is the word I was actually thinking earlier when you were talking, how it used to be. How much is you believe your success rate has actually in breaking down those barriers to actually, so it's a real partnership between you and the families and that?
So it's a really good question. And I think there's two sets of decoding, isn't there? So one are KPIs, which key performance indicators, and some of those things are measurable as in data. So some of that will be around the reduction in the amount of referrals, the reduction in children on plans, the reduction in looked after children. What we want to see, one of our success criteria will be more children in early help and more children in need, where we are not using statutory duties to punish families into doing the right thing. So that will be, so some is absolutely codifiable and some of it will be, we know that the increase here, which other people might say, oh my goodness, look at the massive increase you've had in early help and the massive increase you've had in children in need, we will see that as success, because that means that we are able to work with families in a far more conversational partnership way. And we will not have done this well if we continue to see the rise of child protection plans and children coming into care. So that's how we will begin to codify that.
Sharon, thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me ask several questions.
You're welcome. Next one is Councillor Matthew Salter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was particularly interested early in the presentation. We heard that there is a sort of increase in, I suppose, demand nationally and in the Northwest. And I was wondering what is driving that increase in demand, or I suppose need for support. Is that simply to do with, you know, I suppose population factors and in terms of the number of young people and families, or are there particular factors which are driving that we need to be aware of?
So I don't know whether you remember, Councillor Salter, that I came quite a long time ago to talk about poverty within Lancashire and how that impacts on our work as social care, and that actually where people are despairing, where people are in situations that they feel they have nowhere to go, They are then easy targets for drug pushers, they're easy targets, and the mental health suffers. So what we would say is poverty is a driver, and poverty has become worse, has increased over the last 12 months during the pandemic. So we're absolutely clear that actually what then happens is, and it's all a knock-on, isn't it? So poverty becomes part of the driver. It's not the whole issue, Councillor Salter, but it's part of the driver. Then people, and this is a real generalisation, and I don't want you to think that this is absolutely every family, but people then maybe start to drink more. That sometimes leads to more domestic abuse, which leads to mental health not being as well as it could be, which leads then to you not caring for yourself and your family in the way that maybe you can. So there are lots and lots of factors. There is no one issue that says you do this, all of this will stop. That isn't going to happen. But there are things that we need to be aware of that we begin to look at. So when I talked about school attendance being really, really important, that's linked to poverty, isn't it? Because if you have brilliant school attendance and you do all your exams and you learn how to be socially responsible, you learn academically, and that's not because then you go to university, but you learn academically. What we know is good joiners are great mathematicians. Good electricians are really clever people, actually. And that happens because you are attending all of that. So we need to look at some of the underlying factors that mean that our children sometimes are living in houses of where we don't want them to be. So there are lots and lots of elements, but there are some big issues, some big ticket issues that we really need to think about when we are looking at whole change across the county. And poverty is one of them. And I don't know whether you remember, Councillor Kay, but I came and did quite a long presentation to the committee around poverty and if you live in certain areas of the county, how you will not succeed as well as somebody who lives in another part of the county, etc. And your housing and your social situation all will have an impact on that.
You did, yes. Matthew, anything else?
Yeah, I suppose to follow up on that, I'm interested. So how easy is it, therefore, to kind of predict where we may need to maybe intervene more quickly? And I assume that this is one of those areas where the sooner you can intervene, the better you can kind of prevent, I suppose, an escalation of maybe deterioration of mental health and development of some of the negative processes. You know, to what extent are we able to sort of identify, you know, here's the areas, here are the maybe people that things are more likely to go wrong, and can we put support in place, you know, as soon as possible?
So, Councillor Salter, what I'd say to you is that's exactly what we are doing. So that's why we are expanding our early help. We are looking at that we are now engaged, and I think it's a great credit to Lancashire that we are engaged with our private and voluntary and independent providers around our nurseries, our early years, and we are also working with our early years providers across the county, because what we know is that if people use their 2-year funding properly, their 3-year funding, that we will have children who are school ready. We know where people are not taking up that part of the work. We know where areas are not doing that. We're working really hard with our providers. We're working really hard with our partners. So our health visitors are going in and saying, why are you not taking up your 2-year funding? And sometimes, and I'm going to be honest, that's because people kind of say, oh, yeah, don't really think it's very important for them to go. We know that school readiness is as important as you taking your GCSEs, because if you don't go to school ready, we know that those young people are less likely to get the higher grades at GCSE, because if you're teaching them to go to the toilet at school when they start in reception, that means you've got a lot of catching up to do everywhere else. So one of the things that we say, and we are really pushing, and our providers are really supporting us with, is we need to get those children in those disadvantaged areas, those socio-economic areas that we know are deprivation and in poverty, to be going to use their 2-year funding, their 3-year funding, so that when they come to school, they are ready to learn and not ready to just learn how to put their coat on. So for me, one of the begs I would say for you out there as counsellors is to be saying in your areas, let's be making sure our 2-year funding is being used properly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Councillor Sobia Malik, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sharon, absolutely fantastic to listen to you today, and really uplifting to see the whole picture and how it's emerging. So sincere thanks for all the hard work that you're doing and the business and social work you're doing as well. I'm interested in, talked about we need to be more community based, and I run a local charity in Burnley Central East, and during the pandemic we saw a spike in a number of things, including domestic abuse, and I have as a response started to undertake training with Safe Lives as an IDVA, an independent domestic violence advisor, along with all the other things that you have to do when you run a small charity. But it was really interesting to look at what you were talking about in terms of the key components of family safeguarding, because obviously I'm on my own learning curve here in terms of my training, but it's made me reflect hugely on what we understand by the term abuse. Okay, and I think that there's maybe a sort of, we're in a moment as well in time where we are talking about abuse, domestic abuse, more than perhaps we ever have, as well as what's going on in the news at the moment. So there's a sense here of impetus around this issue, and I'm interested in, you were talking about the motivational interviewing, and that's something that I'm being trained up on as well. So it was heartening, and my heart lifted, Sharon, it really did, to see you describing those aspects of the work. I think what I was wondering was how do you feel, because when you get down to the nuts and bolts of what's happening in communities, you talked about mental health, substance misuse, and domestic abuse. When we think of all the officers involved in the work, how do you feel the training and the level of information sharing and this understanding about abuse, how do you feel we're doing in terms of ensuring everybody has that professional development and understanding? I know it's there, but I'm just interested in how you feel that picture is progressing.
I think it's a really good question, and I think what I would absolutely say to you is that we have undertaken now, I'd be lying if I gave you the absolute figures, but there's over 500 people now who have been through the motivational interviewing training at different levels. So there's some who have had the 5 kind of sessions, there's some who's had 4, 3, 2, 1, but we are absolutely committed to making sure that all of our staff are able to access. In fact, it's compulsory for you to go on to the motivational interviewing training. We haven't done it internally. We have commissioned an external provider that we know does it really, really well. So Alistair Cant and Associates have been commissioned. They've been commissioned for a period of 2 years, because the other thing that we're absolutely clear about, Councillor Malik, and I've talked about it before, is that social workers come and go. So you can't just by osmosis think, oh, a new social worker will go into that team and they'll learn motivational interviewing by hearing them. So it's an ongoing process that people will continually have that updating or the new training. And I think the other thing which is really important to us is, in the past, we've just decided that if you live with a perpetrator of domestic abuse, you're not allowed to do that anymore. And we say, that's it now, you have to throw him out. I'm saying him, I know that there are female abusers, I'm not disputing that. So you now have to throw him out. What we want to do is to say, do you want to learn to live together safely? And how can we help you? Instead of, we're going to assess the risk you pose to your family, and then we'll decide whether you can live with them and whether you can see your children. It's a whole different way of dealing with abuse. And I think you're right, Councillor Malik. We really need to think about, what does abuse mean? And how do we minimise the damage of some of that without deciding that we are so credible that we tell you, you have to throw your partner out, and we will assess, we will tell you when this person can come back in your house. If the answer is we're not prepared to try and make it safe, that goes back to the question before, we would remove your children. It's a given, because my statutory duty is to safeguard children in Lancashire. So it's the balance, but the balance needs to be a bit different than we've done it in the past.
Okay, thank you very much.
Matthew and Anne and Sobia, can you take your hands down, please? Unless, Anne, you've got an extra question to come in with, because you sort of hovered over in the middle, so I wasn't sure if you took it down before. You're on mute, Anne.
Yes, sorry, it was actually an ancillary to something that Matthew Slater raised with Sharon, because I listened very intently. And one of the areas that you did just touch on very neatly was the fact, of course, that we still have a number of what I call older children who are adults now, but are still in full-time education. And I was just wondering, and I know it was a slight aside, but I thought it was quite important, because sometimes one or two of these youngsters have suddenly felt marooned, having gone up to university, COVID moved in, they had not got quite the same contact with their former residential addresses. And I just wondered, and I don't need an answer today, Chairman, but it was just a concerning feature that had we been able just to make sure that they were all right in their, wherever they were based, as I certainly know of two who did not come home at Christmas, if you get my meaning, because nobody could accommodate them. And it was a difficult, you know, in me and Wayu, and I'm sure you have good relationship with some of the universities. I think some have been slightly better than others in that aspect, but it was just a concerning feature. That's something that my colleague raised, and I felt it was left off, because we've just got this group, which might not be as many as we think, but certainly I picked it up on one of the news programs where one was interviewed, and I felt very, very sorry for them. I nearly felt I ought to be sending a food parcel, actually, and some clean laundry, but that's incidental to a young person growing up. But I just wondered if you just could note that, and I don't need an answer today, but I was just interested to know, had we been able to accommodate just that small group of where they sort of suddenly found themselves marooned? Did they make reference back to you for any unknown reason? But I was just that little bit worried, because we put it down on one of the lists for those leaving our system, but those who are still there until they finish their full-time education.
I can answer it, Councillor Cheetham. So we have a responsibility, and I'm assuming you're talking about care experienced care leaver children, not just the general population. No. So yeah, so we have a responsibility, as you know, up to 25. Yeah. And so we contacted every single care experienced young person from 18 to 25 to check that they were all right. Over 1,000 young people. And then, I don't know whether you remember, but Cabinet then agreed that we would pay them the £20 that Universal Credit did, that we would, as the county council, make that money up for them as well, because they're not allowed to claim Universal Credit up until a certain point. So I absolutely can assure you, there were some young people who just didn't want anything to do with us. Fair dues, because some of them are parents of their own children. And I've said this before, why would you want me on your doorstep? But so I can totally assure you, Councillor Cheetham, that we did that piece of work.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our last person is Councillor Jennifer Main, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I add my thanks and admiration, Sharon, for the work that you're doing and continue to do. And the presentation, it was quite succinct. And I find, some of the responses to the questions that you've had, it's really quite inspirational. I do remember your presentation on poverty. And that was a really hard-hitting presentation. And I wondered what's changed since then. And how you feel, what kind of impact you've been able to make as a result of that. I'm just going back to, I'm disappointed that mental health workers are the last people to be recruited to the teams, because I think mental health's taken a backseat for far too long. And I think services have been very poor. I'm not talking about services within LCC. I'm talking about services generally. And throughout COVID, a lot of the services have been lost even further, haven't they? So I am concerned about that. I'm concerned that, I think it's brilliant that they're in the team, but if they find that parents, carers need extra mental health support, I'm concerned how much support there is there behind that. On the domestic abuse, and I understand that I understand, yes, people need to be able to work together, and we need to be able to, if at all possible, keep that family together. How successful have they been in Hertfordshire, do you think, with actually turning round? So they are getting abusive fathers to actually change the ways.
Yeah, it's that what we've talked about, that different relationship. Instead of us going in as the moral police and saying, you have to do this and you have to do this, we start on the premise of, how can we help you to stay together? And that's a very different way of working. It's a bit like if I came into your house and said,
oh, I understand that, Sharon. I'm just thinking there are some abusers who will not change their ways, and how successful are you with that? Presumably they go on programs. Yeah.
So the domestic abuse. So some of those domestic abuse workers are probation officers who already undertake perpetrator programs. So we will know whether those families are committed to making it safe, because the question then is, we have a perpetrator program that you need to come on and we'll support you to go on that. If the answer originally is no, and sometimes people are very frightened, aren't they, of saying, you know what, I'm not a great parent, this is what I've been doing. But we still work with them. And if they go on that perpetrator program, what we absolutely know, and my presentation says, that the call outs on domestic abuse to those families drop. They go. And that gives us less police time dealing with domestic abuse. Where they refuse to go and do that, then we know that they don't want to keep their family safe. And I talked about earlier, we will continue then to remove children from those situations if that's what's required.
Okay. And can I just ask about the pathways in, the pathway in through MASH?
Yes.
Presumably MASH still will signpost to early help and other services as well.
Oh, yes.
So is there a sort of a level at which MASH says, oh, this needs family safeguarding?
Yeah. So, well, no, what it does is this needs a social work assessment. So you come into MASH, somebody, a health visitor, anybody makes a referral about Sharon Hubber. It comes in, the MASH look through the systems. Do they know Sharon Hubber? Has somebody already worked with Sharon Hubber and her family? And then they decide whether that needs to go to early help, or whether they say to the health visitor, you need to do a bit more work with this family. You're bringing this in far too early. You need to go off and find a bit more about this. Or they look on the system, they can see a bit about Sharon Hubber. There's been a few worries about that family, and it goes into the duty and assessment team. The duty and assessment team then go and knock on the door, and they undertake the assessment, and they look at what's going on in this house. What do we need to know about this family, and what is it they need to be able to stay safe? If that is that they need a social work intervention, then it comes to family safeguarding. But at the end of that assessment may say, do you know what? Early help's the right place for them now. It will go into early help. So the system is very clear, but you don't bypass the system to go into family safeguarding. It has to be a proper assessment. And just on your second, you asked two other questions. What about poverty? Well, you know, this last 12 months has seen people furloughed, seen people lose their jobs. We are seeing more and more families requesting free school meals. We are seeing more families going to food banks, and we are seeing more families coming into our early help for support. Poverty is not abuse, and we need to be really clear about that. And we won't be picking up families because they're in poverty. We pick up families because they are abusing their children, or their behaviour is abusive towards children, not because you can't feed them. And we have other ways of dealing with that. So I think we're very clear that people are requiring support because they don't have enough finances to undertake all the things they did before, but we are working really hard. And the mental health services is not last. What's been difficult is that mental health practitioners like to work in clinician ways of working, and so they're not particularly that interested in coming into the teams. But now we've done a really brilliant piece of work. So Mandy and the team have been working really hard to engage mental health practitioners. And what I will say to you is we have got interviews of psychologists in the next 2 weeks, of which hopefully we should get 3 psychologists that are coming into the team. So it's not that mental health will last, it's just that they've had to kind of really persuade some of their staff to come out of clinician and into community. And that's not always an easy step for professionals, but we are getting there because they also understand how important it is for families.
Thanks, Sharon. That's a bit of reassurance for me, and I know, yeah, I know that you will absolutely do your best. Can I just go back to early years as well, though, and how important that is? And I know that you're working with them, but I think early years sometimes the PVI and you know, the maintained nurseries sometimes feel as if they're out on a bit of a limb, and I know they definitely do not have enough financial support. So you know, whatever you can do, whatever LCC can do to ensure that early years is better funded, will be happily accepted. I would say they would be delighted. And we know the importance of it. You know the importance of it. So it's a bit like family safeguarding. If you get it right, it's going to save so much more in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would say that the representatives of PVIs and the maintained are on all kinds of boards. So we have Sasha and we have Peter, and both of those sit on our partnership board and they sit on our Keeping Children Safe board. So I think over the last 12 months, those relationships have increasingly strengthened, I would say. And I think there has been quite a lot of support, but you're right, we always need to be looking, can we do more? Because if we get it right at the very beginning, it's a bit like early help, you reap the benefits later on, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Jennifer. Sophie, have you got a quick question?
Yes, please. Just following up from the point that Councillor Mean was making, talking about the drop in domestic abuse rates if the work is done with perpetrators going on training. What you will know this. There is concern that within that area, that field, that perpetrators, some are very good at working the system and going on the courses and cosmetically appearing to tick all the boxes. Could you just clarify the measures of accountability and monitoring that we would have in place to evaluate that is not something that happens in Lancashire?
So what I would say is that you're absolutely right, and it's a really good point, but this is a very different way of doing it. So in the past, the only way you get perpetrator support is through the court systems and through a criminal way. So actually, you don't really have a choice. It's not an empowered choice as a perpetrator. So either you are going to get a really high criminal tariff, or you're going to get a lower criminal tariff if you agree to go on the course. This is nothing to do with criminality. We will not be charging you with anything. We are not saying that this is going into court, and if you don't do this, this is what will happen. So it's a very, very different way of undertaking the perpetrator programmes, because in the past, the only way you can access a perpetrator programme is through probation, because you've been charged with something. So it's a whole different mindset of how to engage perpetrators. You're absolutely right, there'll be some game players, of course there will. What I would say to you is that my staff are incredibly skilled at understanding when people are not working with us in the way that they should be working with us. And there will be some of them, but it's a whole new, exciting way of working with families that doesn't rely on the courts to punish perpetrators. It's about no punishment. It is about how do we make your children safe. It's just a subtle change in language.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to introduce Mandy as well. Mandy Williams, Head of Service Family Safeguarding, been sat there. So it's lovely to see you, Mandy. Would you like to make any comments?
No, hello, yeah. So I'm the sort of operational lead for family safeguarding. I'm really sorry I had a mix-up, so I was late. But I think that Sharon's superbly answering your questions, so I don't have anything to add. But
it was nice to welcome you anyway, and for members to meet you, and then they know, you've got a picture to your name. So that was lovely. I just wanted to bring you in. I didn't want to think that we'd left you out there. So thank you, Sharon, for a really in-depth presentation this morning. You've answered lots of questions, and it's wonderful for you to be here. We know how hard you and your team are working. We do appreciate the time that you take to come out to us. For members, we are asked as a committee to note the progress of the model and how the service will move forward following the implementation. But also we're asking Sharon and her team, would you come back in 6 months' time? Who might be a new committee, who knows? And then you can update us and see how we're moving forward, because I think that's really important. That came from Susie, so thank you, Susie. So thank you, ladies. Have a lovely day.
Thank you, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Right, we're moving on to item 5, overview and scrutiny work programme for 2021. As this is the last scheduled meeting of the committee during the municipal year and currently administrative term, I would like to propose that the items currently listed on the work programme be considered for inclusion on the 21-22 work programme by the new committee with responsibility for scrutinising education and children's services following the elections in May. The recommendation is that the item currently listed on the Education and Children's Services Committee work programme will be considered for the inclusion of the 21-22 programme and the new committees with the responsibility for scrutinising education and children's services following the elections in May 2021. So can I just note while we're saying that, I would like to thank the committee for the work that you've done, the questions that you ask, how you take part. It's so important. Some people will not be in the next municipal year. So I wish you good luck in anything that you're doing moving forward. And it's been a pleasure working with everybody. So now we'll go on to item 6. So urgent business, there is none. Sorry, Jimmy, I've missed your hand.
It's okay, Chair. I would just like to endorse what you've said, but also to yourself as the chair on this committee, which I think you've done an excellent job, and it's a credit to you and your officers. And I wish you all success in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Item 7, the date of the next meeting is scheduled for the Tuesday, the 8th of June, 21 at 10:30 a.m. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the officers as well that are always there to support us in any questions or anything that we have. And good luck with whatever your future aspirations are. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Chair.
Chair.
Take care.
Thank
It's a
you
pleasure.
and goodbye.
Safe, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.